Okay, welcome John. Great to have your company again. We seem to do these type of interviews at the start of every season, but this season's going to be one like no other. So we were very keen to take you up on your opportunity to field some questions from the fans. They are well thought out. Apologies to any fans who've sent questions in if we don't cover them all. We've tried to kind of group them. We've tried to put a little bit of structure around the time. So if there is anything that we don't cover, of course, people can contact RaithTV and we'll pick them up at a future point. I'm always encouraged, John, because you tend to give me one direction when interviewing, and that is really ask me anything. I'm assuming it's the same rules today?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm saying today because I think we'll set a bit of a RaithTV record today, given this will be our longest distance interview, because I think there's about 5,800 miles between us. So that maybe explains in the viewers' pictures why I'm so large and you're so small in the distance. But we've messed about with Zoom for long enough. We thought we'd just get going. So will we jump right in now, John?
Sure, no problem.
Great. The first question we've got is from Leslie, and Leslie's very complimentary to the work that Margie's done, Margie Robertson and Andy Mill, in terms of being a real visible link between fans, the board, and the kind of club structures. Can you tell us a wee bit about how important are volunteers at Starks Park? How can we maximise supporter participation? I know that kind of independently of these meetings, you've kind of said that in the past that, you know, it's the volunteers at times are actually the backbone that keeps the club moving.
Absolutely. The club couldn't survive without the volunteers. And anyone who's been around the stadium, I think a couple of weekends ago, would have seen people in painting and tidying up and moving stuff around, and we're really, it's a zero-sum game. What money we've got, what we spend, and what's left goes on the player budget. And we all want to see a successful team, and Raith need to be able to compete at the highest level possible. So anything that we can get volunteers to do is great financially, but that's not the point. The point is it brings people closer to the club, and we're working on it. I don't think we've ever really managed to define exactly what we mean when we say a community club, but again, I think we're making progress. I think the community foundation has gone on with leaps and bounds in the last year or so, bringing the ladies in, walking football, what was Real 5, and they had a very successful Holiday Heroes. They've got another one coming up, and we really want to build with that. At the same time, in terms of the club itself, we just depend so much on volunteers, especially on match day. And we're very grateful for the time that people put in.
We had some really positive contributions post our last interview, because one of the things that you made a point of saying is that the door is open. Obviously it's complex times with the current pandemic, but could we reissue that kind of mantra that if people feel that they've got a skill that the club could benefit from, whether it be some hours to do some painting, some weeding out the front, or something that's more specialist, that the phone's still there ready to be answered?
Absolutely. I believe that most people are aware that Scott Boyd has now started as Stadium Development Manager, and he's been working on that project, partly with Andy, partly with others. And at the same time, we've got a new general manager in Bill Harvey, and he's very keen to get people as engaged as possible, and has got some great ideas about what we should be doing in that sort of area.
What about Scott's one of the new faces that's been around for a couple of months now, but obviously people have not been down at the stadium. What does Scott's role entail?
Okay, Scott's been brought on as Stadium Development Manager. Phase 1 was tidying up the stadium, because the stadium, to be perfectly honest, was becoming a bit of a tip. Stage 2 is to look at how we can develop a master plan for stadium development over a 5 to 10 year period, but at the same time he's been working on various individual projects, all of which take a lot of time and actually are quite expensive. But something like, we have a terrible problem with pigeons in the concourse, so we're now going to supposedly pigeon-proof it. We are in the process of replacing all the seats in the north stand that were damaged. Part of the problem was wayward shots, so we've now got netting to protect the stands at both ends. We're looking at reducing our electricity bill, which is huge. So we're putting LED lights on the concourses, and we're looking at what we need to do about the floodlights. Because running the floodlights, I'm now told, is about £40 an hour. Whereas with LED, it could be as low as a tenth of that, because you get far more control of the intensity of the light and the areas of the picture light. So Scott's looking at all of these projects. Every week he produces 2 pages of where he's at and what's coming next. We're in the process of replacing the CCTV, which we have to do for championship standard and in order to reduce policing costs and stewarding costs. We're about to sign a contract to create what we call Digital Starks Park with an outside supplier who eventually may beam super fast broadband to Kirkcaldy West using the floodlight towers. And he's just working through these type of projects. The next big phase is a community hub behind the North Stand. And he's already got a working plan, and I think they're almost at the costing stage. And the hope is that we could implement that next close season. At the same time, there are bits and pieces being done in the main stand. We're refurbishing the referees room.
The great thing about these chats is that you often expand into 2 or 3 different questions at the same time. So in terms of the railway stand, we've got a bit of a focus on that particular area, but Stevie and Adam they'll be delighted to know that the new seats, am I right saying they've been ordered and ready to replace those in the North Stand?
Correct. I think that they've already put the frames in and the seats will go in the next week. We won't tell the fans that the directors are looking at upgrading their seats, but that's not for the directors, that's really for hospitality. And we've got a very good price from a supplier, and I think the cost of upgrading the seats over the life of the seat, which is expected to be 10 years, I think it's something like £50 a game. So we just need to sell one more hospitality seat in order to cover that cost.
I mentioned the railway stand, John. There's a lot of questions kind of centre around that particular area of the pitch. Questions round about what's the short term, what's the long term plan? Will we ever see a standing section? Is it going to have a hospitality focus? Is it more kind of commercial use that you would see? What's your kind of short, medium and long term vision for the railway stand?
Okay, well, Alex Penman, a couple of years very kindly, spent a fair bit of effort in coming up with a concept for the railway stand. And the concept was that it should be premium seating because it's a premium view of the pitch, and it should have conference type facilities on the basis that you don't build anything now for 2 hours 20 times a year, which is how often the first team are essentially using Starks Park. And we've got quite far down with that concept. We need to talk to Network Rail. We've had Network Rail in the last 2 weeks because anyone who's parked in the car park behind the North Stand will know the wall was falling down. Well, Network Rail have agreed to fix the wall, and we're talking to them about the possibility of driving through under the arch of the railway bridge so that we could get back up around to Balwearie. Because, for instance, the Community Foundation has got programs at both Balwearie and Starks Park. As I understand it, Fife Athletics Club is looking at developing the running track in Balwearie. And increasingly, I think that we've all got to work together And if we could get through Balwearie, we can then get to the Beveridge Park without having to take people up Pratt Street and through the tunnel. So all of that's being looked at. The railway stand was at the top of my priority because that's where I want to watch football from. But to be honest with you, it slipped back a little bit, partly because of the community hub in the North Stand. And we hope to get that done early. So my guess is the railway stand maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, but it will be dependent on us showing that Starks Park as an entity can survive and can amortize any debt that we need to go into in order to redo the railway stand.
So it sounds like the community hub's got a really important part to play in whether or not and the time frame for the railway stand development. Can you tell us a wee bit about the community hub, its location, its size, its structure?
Okay, my understanding, and this has all been done while I've been out of the country, is that we will have changing rooms for, I think, 4 teams, which sounds a lot, but I'm pretty sure it's 4 teams, and a community area, both inside and outside, with a hospitality bar area, and also some office space, plus a new first aid room, partly inside the North Stand and partly through prefabricated units going into the car park.
Well, that is part of that to extend the kind of hospitality option for away fans coming. We've got some questions about the 200 club. Will we ever see that expanded? I'm guessing that actually just the geography of the stadium limits that in some ways. Okay,
certainly we see away fans as a target audience. It's probably easier to attract an extra 100 away fans to a game at Starks Park than it is to attract an extra 100 home fans. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to go after both, but we really want to be able to give visiting fans a day out to Kirkcaldy. If you look at the Pie and Bobble and various other fora, they seem to enjoy coming to Kirkcaldy, those who come. So we would like to encourage that. At the same time, we want to be able to use it for instance, our biggest tenant at the moment is FIFA, Fife Elite Football Academy. And I was down at the park last season, and there's all these poor people shivering in the cold in the North Stand, and their mothers and fathers and people have come to watch. So we want to give them someplace warmer where they can spend their money and get a cup of coffee, rather than having to go down to Morrison's, which a lot of them do at the moment.
In terms of the spectator experience coming to Starks Park, we've got a question about, has there been discussions, will there be discussions in terms of the facilities that we offer to disabled supporters coming to Starks Park? I mean, I think that there's an interesting project called Line of Vision where wheelchair users actually post a picture of how they see the game, and the key point being that often their vantage point is sometimes even sub-pitch level, where other people choose not to sit. They're often, folks are unprotected from the elements. Is the quality of experience for disabled fans something that's on the agenda?
It's always on the agenda, but the problem is always we don't have any lifts. And we're going to have to start getting lifts in to get people up to an acceptable level. The railway stand, when it's redeveloped, may be easier because you can get up around the back, and then it's a strange thing to say, but people will be going down rather than up. But we are looking at it. Earlier you talked about safe standing. We actually looked at safe standing because we thought, is there any point in putting new seats in the North Stand? Should we put in safe standing? Kilmarnock have got safe standing, but they've been told they can't use it while COVID's on. So we decided no. And interestingly, when we had our safety certificate, we broached the subject with Fife Council, and they were not enthusiastic. So we're going to have to lead them down the road, because apparently in order to have safe standing, we need planning permission. Now, I'm told that Celtic already have safe standing. And one of the things that Scott said to me was, he said, as a player, you can tell the difference when spectators are standing. It makes it far more exciting, even for the players. So I think we need to, our hope would be that when you walk up the north stand and the south stand, and you come up onto the pitch view, you would go down to safe standing and you'd go up to seating.
So that would be utilising the current stand rather than the railway stand, or we certainly won't see a return to the enclosure of the previous decades that we enjoyed. Has the enclosure space been earmarked for any development?
The enclosure space being between the north stand.
Behind the dugouts
yes,
at the front of the main stand?
Yes. First thing is we're looking at, I hesitate because what I want to do and what's sensible to do are different. One of the mistakes that we probably made was we didn't extend the width of the pitch when we put down the carpet. And I think the standard width is at 68 and we're 63. But either way, we have enough room to come up to the standard Premier League size pitch. And in fact, we can use the existing carpet for it. The piece we'd have to sew on would be the runoff on the main stand side. So one of the things that Scott's looking at, which we've been talking about for years, is how we can remodel the area in front of the main stand and we can actually have people standing right down there. That's one of the reasons why we don't want you to totally tear away our pie stand.
Absolutely. Back to the future, that would be a very welcome addition, I'm sure. And we can move on in terms of the questions that have been put forward. There's quite a number of questions with regards the makeup of the board and the current kind of ownership of the stadium. Can you tell us about the relationship, where it stands just now between Raith Rovers and Starks Park Properties in terms of the landlord-tenant relationship, who incurs the cost for the works that are being done? And I think there's certainly a few questions we received were about any arrears that Raith Rovers have in their rents. Where is that at? Does it pose any problem to the club's future moving forward?
Okay, well that's an interesting one. Let me start with the arrears and the rent, because I think at least one of the people who wanted information on that asked me about it. So I've got the draft accounts for the year ending to May, which the auditors have promised that they will finish in the next 2 weeks. And at the end of May, the club was £429,000 in arrears on its rent from prior years, and £15,000 was owed in respect to the 12 months ended in May. So in the 12 months ended in May, the club paid Starks Park Properties £36,700 in terms of rent. But Starks Park Properties lent Raith Rovers £35,300 in rent. Now this seems a bit convoluted, but the legacy from the Anelka years was the bank loan. And when Reclaim the Rovers took place in 2005, one of the first things we had to do, because the bank insisted on it, and I also insisted on it, was to convert the overdraft into a term loan. And the conditions of the term loan, which were negotiated by Eric, who's obviously a banker, and got us some good terms, because our interest rate is variable and has gone down with interest rates. So we were very fortunate in that regard, but there's covenants about the minimum rent that Raith Rovers must pay each year. Now, in fairness to the bank, when we started, we were one of their riskiest customers, and we've never missed a payment, and they pretty much left us alone for the last 5 years. But a lot of it, I won't say it's smoke and mirrors, it's more like right pocket and left pocket. But the loan, the last payment will be in November. So after November, we will have retired that loan. That's the good news. The sort of bad news is that we've just taken another loan out at the Raith Rovers level, but that was because of the government scheme whereby small and medium-sized enterprises could get an instant loan from the bank. So we took a £50,000 loan from Clydesdale Bank, which I think is repayable over 6 years. We've not used it. It's sitting in the bank. We would like to retire it early, but the main loan with Allied Irish Bank, which was in Starkspire Properties, will be paid off on the 30th of November. Now, the lease...
Can you clarify, John, the headline figure there that I imagine some fans watching this will kind of reel back in their sofas when they hear of an arrears of close on £500,000 in terms of rent. Can you tell us a wee bit more about how risky that is for the club?
It's not risky at all at the moment because it's right pocket and left pocket.
I just wanted you to clarify that.
Yeah, now, one of the things that we've been talking about is that we need to restructure the shareholdings of Raith Rovers Football Club, Raith Rovers Holdings, New Raith Rovers, Starkspire Properties, and Ali Moore had a look at that, but was put off a little bit by the difficulties of dealing with the different groups and classes of shareholders. Now, we've done some work on it in the last few months, but our shareholder register is not up to date. And we don't know where a lot of the shareholders are, or even if they're alive or not. So that's a project that's ongoing. And what we're going to try to do is to get agreement that we can communicate by email rather than by mail, so that we can actually move forward in the next few years in terms of restructuring it.
And certainly we did have some questions with regards to the structures, not just for Raith Rovers and Starkspire Properties and so forth, but it is an incredibly complex ownership structure. Is part of the thinking there that it may attract new investment if we can simplify that, the enigma that is our ownership pyramid?
Well, that's a good question, Davey, because who wants to own the club? Once a quarter, I get an inquiry, is the club for sale? And you've just seen Dunfermline seem to now be about to be taken over by a bunch of Germans. My basis is that previous absentee landlords have not gone down well in Kirkcaldy. And essentially, the consensus that certainly till now I have felt is that they want ownership to remain in Kirkcaldy or in the Kirkcaldy area, or with people who have got a very strong association with the club. So that means that it's difficult to go out and get significant new investment because they want control. But there are certainly a lot of people out there looking to buy. I mean, you would have seen Dundee be bought. We've seen Dunfermline, as I say, in the process of being bought. We've got new owners, I guess, at Hibs. And the real question is it possible for the fans to own a club? And all the advice I get is no. Because people keep saying to me, show me a successful example. Now, there's got to be a way of doing it. We've just got to work out how.
Would that be your long-term ambition, your kind of legacy to leave the club to the fans with an appropriate structure around it?
I hope to live for another 100 years, Stevie.
I wasn't putting a time frame.
No. Unless somebody came in who could really take the club to the next level, and there was a general consensus in Kirkcaldy and the surrounding areas, Glenrothes, Burndale, and wherever, that this was too good an opportunity to miss. I get no intention of selling either shares in the club or shares in Starkspur Properties.
But certainly the last 3 seasons in League One, we've posted quite significant losses. Is the message that the club is, if not buoyant, then certainly there's a degree of good health there?
It's all about discipline, and it's all about having plan and having a structure. And it's only now that we're, in my view, starting to get that. I'm very comfortable with the people who are on the board. I'm very comfortable with the people who come in, whether it be Paul Gregg at the Community Foundation, or Scott Boyd, or Warren Hawke, who played for us briefly, who's been helping as a consultant. And we're beginning to be able to benchmark, because the problem is that if you support a football team, you only know your football team. And the question I keep trying to work out is, how does Arbroath do it? How did Hamilton do it? How did Livingston do it? And sometimes I'll say to the board, you know, if we're honest, we've underachieved. Because I don't think that they had that much more money than we did. Okay, Livingston went bust a couple of times, and Hamilton inherited some of our former shareholders, but we need to understand how these clubs have managed it and try to replicate it. For instance, we're very much into this hybrid model. But if you talk to the management team, they say it's just not possible to get the type of players that we want. Now, I think that we can change that over time. You know, for me, it was great to get Jamie McDonald, because Jamie's coming to the end of his career. He's preparing for life after Raith Rovers and after professional football. And we're working with them on outside learning, that type of stuff, so that if he gets 3 or 4 more seasons, at the end of that, he can go off into the career that he wants. Now, he couldn't necessarily do that if he had stayed with a normal full-time club, because he'd been training every day. I know that Davo last year enjoyed the opportunity to caddy up at St Andrews, because it was possible to caddy and still get back in time for training in the evenings. So I think that we've really got to look at how we can sell the Raith Rovers proposition to players, and we don't do a good enough job on it, because the players who have been around say that Raith Rovers are pretty good at looking after people in terms of injuries, in terms of operations, in terms of rehabilitation. So the club does have a good career. The former players love coming back. So we must, over a consistent number of years, done something right. We've just got to try and sell ourselves better.
Yeah, certainly that's a consistent message that all of us volunteering with RaithTV get from former players going back through many decades, is that there's a kindness to the club that's much valued, and that obviously starts at the top and comes down through ourselves as volunteers. In terms of looking from the top, we've seen some changes in the boardroom, or some changes may be imminent. Certainly our chairman's resigned over recent weeks, really. What's your thoughts on will there be a new structure in the boardroom? Have you got plans that you're able to share, willing to share?
I think we're always on the lookout for new directors. And any boardroom needs to have a suite of skills. It was as much a surprise to me as it was, I know, to some of the fans, is at times when we had 3 and 4 accountants on the board, why couldn't we do a budget properly? So normally when you build a board, whether it be Raith Rovers or the King's Theatre or the Old Cut Trust or any of the others that I'm involved in, you try to have people with different skills on it. And at the moment, the guys who are on the board all contribute totally different things. I'd say that David Sinton is the most underrated of the directors over a long period of time. We wouldn't have had an artificial surface if it hadn't been for David. And he's now really spent a lot of time understanding the accounts and giving us good budgets and putting us in good shape for the year ahead, and not knowing when will we have crowds, what will happen about streaming, anything. So Andy did a tremendous job in terms of the fundraising, as well as the volunteers. You know, the auditors didn't believe it. We made a profit last year, Davey, of over £100,000.
Do you have a chairman in mind? Would that be a mantle that you would carry, or would you pass that to someone already in the ken of the club?
I think that at the moment, this is not going to be an easy season. Our number one priority is survival in the championship. To be honest with you, I have no idea how the players that we brought up from England are going to adapt to Scottish Championship. You know, we got a glimpse of it, or some people got a glimpse of it on Tuesday. Manny scored with a header. And the others who got a run out look pretty good, but it's early days. So I wouldn't ask anyone to do something I wouldn't be willing to do myself. It seems as if it's in vogue in the championship for the chairman to be overseas in terms of Ayr United and Dundee and all sorts of other bits and pieces. But we've got a very open mind about it. You know, there's a lot of people on the board that could take it on, but they're doing other things. You know, Stephen McDonald's done a tremendous amount in terms of refurbishing the stadium, but he's also the most knowledgeable about football in Fife. So I don't want him to be burdened with the chairmanship at this point. My guess is that one day he will be the chairman, but what I've asked him to do is to look at how do we get to the Premier League.
Are you in daily contact with the club? I mean, at one point, the distance was seen as a real barrier, but I think that all of our lives have evolved, that this kind of technology is just ordinary parts of our life now. Is it a kind of daily, weekly update that you get? How closely attached are you to the
okay, I don't think distance was never a problem. Please remember, I ran a global organization, but people didn't want to talk to me. That's changed.
Okay. What's been the big change that's opened the doors?
I think obviously when you're in a crisis, things change. I think also people were worried about bringing in people from outside. And I tried to get Warren involved a number of occasions, and eventually I just called him from Thailand and said, I need somebody who knows the business. You built up the Morton Community Foundation. You ran Morton as CEO. You've got a coaching badge. You've had a playing career. You work for the Professional Footballers Association. Would you be willing to help me understand the business? And that's really what he's brought to it. You know, he can tell me what works or what doesn't work, or he knows somebody who can. So he says, oh, I'll call this guy, call that guy. So I think that's made a big difference.
You mentioned about the challenges that are ahead in this season. You know, certainly will be a season like no other. Tell us about the impact of the coronavirus in terms of where the club find themselves now and how prepared we are for our first championship season in 4.
Okay, well, one of the good things was that on Tuesday we had the people who attended the game at Tannadice had a chance to see how Dundee United had been doing it, and so identify any gaps that we felt we had. And it appears that they're comfortable that we're in good shape. We had FIFA back this week, I believe, at the beginning of the week, and they were very complimentary about the setup. We got lots of signs put up, and again, Stephen McDonald's been great in providing anything from hand gel to PPE to signs, other bits and pieces.
Financially, can we see through a season without fans being present?
Well, we will see through this. We will see the season through without fans being present. Dundee United have been very surprised by the level of take-up of streaming. Pleasantly surprised. And they said the big issue for all clubs is it worth opening the stadium?
Is that in terms of limited numbers of fans coming in, if that's an option, because that would potentially remove the streaming option?
Well, one, it will reduce the streaming option, and two, there'll be the cost of running a full stadium with limited numbers now. As I think we either mentioned at the beginning of this or before we started recording, the rules are changing every day. We got a directive saying that everyone had to have 9 square meters of space. Well, 9 square meters would mean you could have one person in every 9 seats. That's very different from 6-foot rule or being outside in 1.5 meters with people wearing masks. So we're just going to have to see how it pans out. We will survive this season, but the fewer fans we have and the less income we have, the less we've got to invest in the ground, and the less that we've got if we need to go into the loan market or we need to do something at the transfer window, because our number one priority has got to be survival.
We're recording on Thursday today, and we're currently working on a kind of press release for RaithTV in terms of updating fans where we're at. Now that the information is becoming much clearer as to what we can do, what we can't do, what we can keep in-house, and where we may need some support. Could you tell us a wee bit about the very forward-looking, almost kind of future-proofing that the club have taken on in terms of the investment you've made in our own service, RaithTV?
Well, I don't think we've invested enough, but don't tell Neil that. I think we gave you everything you asked for. Is that correct? Is that fair?
That's as it stands just now, but we always have time to ask for more. We're people with lots of time in our hands.
Well, I mean, this is the point, is if we can't get people into the ground, then we need to be able to give them their football fix one way or the other. And
so the plan,
you and I talked about this before. We have so many Raith Rover supporters who never come to watch us. Now, some of them are too old. So let's show the games on Mondays and Tuesdays, and if they're in a care home or somewhere, they can watch with their grandkids, or they can talk to the guys who went to the game. Or there's so many things that we could do if we had the people. It's not about, to me, the money or the cost is the easier part, because you will get it back. We now also have a 2 days a week person looking at grants that are available for the Community Foundation, for the club, for Starks Park. And the first recommendation that we got was that we should probably create yet another entity, and that's a Starks Park Foundation. Because if we create a Starks Park Foundation, it will be easier for them to get grant money to develop projects that will benefit the community. Because Starks Park Properties is seen more as a commercial operation focused on the football club.
But coming back to the 90 minutes, that's I guess the absolute key guarantee that people have had from the point of looking towards renewing their season ticket is that if fans aren't allowed in the stadium, we're developing a stronger infrastructure. We're developing an infrastructure that will be able to cope with the volume of supporters logging in. So they will have their 90 minutes fixed from Starks Park. Away games being a bit more tricky and dependent on league guidance whether or not the away media team will be allowed access. But we're, as a group, we're all confident and connected that we'll be able to offer a much improved service this year for even the people who are used to RaithTV.
Well, I mean, my understanding is that we're going to have the cameras in the north stand and the south stand. We also, I believe, will have access to the Pixelot feed should we choose to use it. We've significantly upgraded the internet connection into the ground. I think that's already been done. And then we're working with Rapier Systems on what we call Digital Starks Park, which will cover the ground with Wi-Fi and allow us to take full advantage of the electronic ticket system and various other security measures and initiatives that are in the pipeline.
In terms of this transition, when it does come time for us to get back to the stadium, we've got a question that it just struck me as being really quite key in terms of its simplicity, but really its accuracy. I wonder how other clubs do this, but has there been any discussion that if we reach a point where we're allowed 100, 300, 500 fans back in the stadium, how will those positions be allocated? A draw? Is there anything more formal?
We'll give people 10 minutes at a time, Davey. They can come in at the north stand and they can walk down the side and out at the south stand. We haven't looked at it. And this comes back to the Dundee United. At what point do you say if we can have that? We can only have so many in the ground. There's no point having them in the ground. Now, what I understand is we've been approached by other clubs in the Championship about can they show the RaithTV feed in their social clubs on the basis that they're not going to be able to come to Kirkcaldy to watch the game themselves. So I think there's a lot of creativity around.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, I think it's probably important for myself representing RaithTV to feed in that certainly the discussions we've had with the SPFL and their lead officer, Luke, have been really engaging. They've been very much very outward looking in what they're looking to allow us to do and how their systems might be used to enhance, I guess, all championship teams' output. The journey this season that you mentioned earlier is about consolidation. It's about getting into the future seasons, at least as a championship club. You mentioned earlier about the aspiration for yourself and for all of us is to see ourselves ascend into the Premiership as we did back in the mid-90s. We often see that people ask the question about what's the time frame for moving onwards and upwards. I'm more interested in asking, what do you think is required within the club in order to make that a possibility?
Well, this is what we're trying to sort out in our own minds. And we need to look at it from a financial perspective first. And my guess is that in order for us to have a playing budget that would give us a chance of getting to the Premiership, we would probably need an extra £400,000. But it's a chicken and egg situation. If you get to the Premiership, you get far more money once you've got there. And that's why the difficult thing is getting to the top of the hill. Once you get to the top of the hill, you can coast down the hill a little bit. And that's what is putting potentially as a slight disadvantage if these people are coming in from Germany or the US or wherever to bankroll teams to get them to the top of the hill so they can roll down the other side. I think you need a combination of more financial resource, a team that is growing up together. and a team that, and a management team that can get them there. Now, there's no reason to believe that we don't have a management team who can't get them there. And, you know, it was unfortunate that we had to let Kieran go to Fulham. If we could have kept him for another couple of years, who knows what we could do. But at the same time, we've got to show that we're not going to stand in the way of these guys.
In terms of, you know, if it's a £400,000 budget, we would like to think that that the leap forward could come in time through stronger support from the town and all of the outlying areas where Rovers fans are drawn from. How do we engage more fans in Raith Rovers from an early age, the Rory Club all the way through, and how do we recapture those that have drifted? Is there an opportunity in this current circumstance to reattach people to the club?
Well, I think there is, and if you look at the experiences of other clubs, you can see it. I was quite interested to see the pictures from the Holiday Heroes, and those school children are not wearing Raith Rovers strips. They obviously have an affinity to other clubs. And I remember the Ayr United the Ayr United owner commenting on the fact that when they started their school children program, they were all wearing Rangers and Celtic shirts, and now they wear Ayr United shirts. And I heard exactly the same thing about Morton. So we really got to give people an experience which starts them young and keeps them close. But if you look at the season ticket holders, the headline number's good, but when you drill down into it, it's not nearly so good, because there are very few people relative to the population in the 25 to 65 age group. And that's when they have families, and that's when we want to encourage them to bring their kids.
Is there room to be looking at a specific season ticket maybe for primary age children? We have a kind of young persons that goes from pay at the gate price at the age at which point 5 years old when you're ready to pay all the way through, but we don't have a primary age season ticket as of yet.
I think we've got to look at everything. I would certainly be very supportive. You know, I can remember I used to pay 1 and 6p, and I have no idea how much 1 and 6p is in today's money, but I got to believe it's less than the prices that we're charging at the moment.
Players. You mentioned young Kieran, who came in like a breath of fresh air, and not only in terms of his goals, but his energy and his personality. We are a club of a certain stature that are probably always going to have to be a selling club. How do we make sure that we secure the next Kieran Bowie and the next Colin Cameron and so on and so forth? We have the link with the Fife Elite. Is that seen as the best route forward? Will we ever see a time where we have our own academy again? Okay,
it's a route forward. We've got to, in my view, we've got to be involved in the Fife Academy. At the same time, if you look at young Luke, he came from Celtic's academy. And we're lucky that John and Paul are well connected. And they look all over Scotland for these young players. It's been interesting that Dunfermline have, in their press releases, the investors have talked about running their own youth program. So nobody knows exactly what that means for FIFA going forward. But I think that one of the projects that we've been working on is what we call a complete football pathway, where we've got it from, you know, pre-kindergarten all the way up to walking football.
What is it, John, that you've told us about what you aspire to achieve at Raith Rovers in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the stadium, in terms of aspirations on the pitch? What is it that gives you most pleasure? What is it that keeps your drive going for our club?
That's a good question, because your enthusiasm levels go up and down, to be perfectly honest. And I take great delight in seeing the children enjoy playing on Starks Park. I take great delight in when I'm ever depressed, Davey, I look at the Dunfermline game and watch the reaction of the people in the South Stand when Lewis scored the third goal. And when you see that, you know that you can't give up. You've just got to do better.
We've covered. I've kind of worked through all of the questions that we've been asked to service, kind of jump in between them so we could have some flow to the interview. But certainly a question that I always like to finish with when we have these sessions is, what's your message to the fans? What's your message to the town? We know that this season is going to be difficult. We know it's going to be a season like no other. But you know, out of adversity, there is sometimes hope. What's your own message to Raith Rovers fans?
Good question. I know the answer, I'm just not sure I should say it. But let me say it. Please don't boo players before they come on.
Do you think we could be a more hospitable set of supporters?
I think we're very hard to please, and I include myself in that. You know, I have never liked sitting in the director's box, in the sense that I got to be careful, or try to be careful about what I say, especially about players. And I think players are more sensitive than they used to be. And I've heard a number of them say, and the managers say, about how important support from the terracing can be. And maybe the time for criticism is in the 200 club afterwards.
We do also have our positive side, where it's not always easy supporting Raith Rovers, but it's certainly a responsibility that none of us who walk up Pratt Street shy away from. Is there anything that makes you smile?
Absolutely, and I can remember as a child, as a teenager, the number of times I left before the end of the game because I couldn't bear to watch the final minutes. So it's one of the directors put it very well to me this week, that you cannot explain to people what it's like to be the director of a football club, because your heart fights your head the entire time. But we're in good shape. We're in good shape, and you know, Tom Morgan does a great job in being out in the community and getting our sponsors involved. And I know that if the COVID crisis goes badly, that I'm not worried, because I know that people will be there to help, and we will get through it, and we'll be one of the better teams to get through it.
Were you struck with some awe in terms of the fundraising that took place as the pandemic took hold? The volume of the contributions that came from far and wide?
To be honest, I was guilty. I felt guilty. I mean, everybody was facing a tough time. And it's humbling when people will put their hands in their pockets to protect something that is important to them, but it can't be their top priority. So yes, and Andy and the team did a great job, and you know, everybody chipped in. Former players were auctioning stuff. You know, people were walking across bridges. It was quite something.
John, thanks very much for your time. We will obviously roll this out in its edited format to the support, and we're happy to field questions that we'll bring to you in the future. Thanks for your time.
Not at all, my pleasure.